Welcome back. So you just watched the twin video, which was a great demonstration of pragmatics, that social functional use of communication. They didn't have an advanced vocabulary or sentence structure, but they were using communication for social purpose. They were taking conversational turns. They weren't babbling over top of each other. It was, one babbling, then the other. They had adult-like inflection, which was the rise and fall in the pitch of their voice. And it seemed that they were using their communication to try to accomplish a goal. There was a closed door, maybe locked, and they were trying to get through that door, whether they were making a plan with each other to try to get through, or whether they were hoping that an adult would hear them and understand their request. They were clearly communicating with each other for that social use. And this ties back to the beginning of the first video of this lecture that we watched that had an entire page full of, um, pragmatic functions of communication, all of the different purposes that somebody might use communication for. And when your students are using AAC and they never progress past "I want goldfish," they're not really getting access to all of the different functions and purposes of language. It's just a request. And we really want to enable our learners, our students, to be able to share some of these more social uses of communication. So when we talk about those communication components, the phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, we want to make sure that we are developing all of those, not just vocabulary, but that we're developing all of those purposes and components of communication. To do that, we can use a couple different AAC options. When it comes to low-tech tools, there's a nice variety. There are topic boards, which if you think back to the core boards that you all have been working on, it's a page full of vocabulary. For topic boards, it's a page full of vocabulary that's themed, with a bunch of words that would go together for, a particular topic. So one topic might be activities. You'd have essentially a communication board just full of activities. Oh, it's time for activities? Well, here's what I want. It might be, bubbles, ball, swing set, slide, iPad, music, videos, might just be a page full of activities so that when it's activity time, they can say, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm finished with that, so I'm ready to move on to this activity. So that's one option. Another is PECS, which a lot of you might be familiar with. It's the Picture Exchange Communication System. Most typically, sometimes it's just a page, but more often it's like a flip book or a small binder full of Velcro pictures that a student can either rip off and then hand to their communication partner, or they can put it on a sentence strip so they can start developing that syntax, the language or the sentence structure behind their communication. So PECS has a few advantages. Like I said, it can be used to develop that syntax. Another advantage of PECS is that it's clearly designed to be interaction between a student and a communication partner, whether it's a teacher or one of their peers. Something like a topic board, you might have a student that's just sitting there pointing to bubbles to nobody in particular. And sometimes they get bubbles, so they learn, okay, that's how I get bubbles. I just poke that picture. But they might not be developing or grasping that communication occurs between people. So if they're using PECS, they have to hand the picture or they have to hand the sentence strip to their communicator. So they're really grasping that social aspect of language where you need a communication partner or you're not going to get your bubbles. Something important to note about PECS is that it's a structured program that has very specific policies and rules for it. To do actual PECS, you need to attend PECS training programs and become certified. If your district ever offers you the opportunity to do so, go for it. But just because it's own specific thing and you can't actually do PECs without being certified, that doesn't mean you can't use the same principles of the picture exchange. Picture exchange is, honestly, it's everywhere in schools. And it's important to learn how to do it, but you don't necessarily need those PEC certification to be able to implement your own picture exchange program in the classroom. The next low-tech tool we will discuss is POD, which is in this picture right here. It's, I believe, pragmatically organized dynamic display. It often looks like this kind of flip book or a binder kind of thing. It often has like a standard vocabulary set where it's not necessarily adapted or customized for its own specific user. So these pods, they can have different symbols. It's already happened. It's about now. It's going to happen. By pressing this or by touching this, the communicator knows, or the communicator is able to share what and when they're talking about, and then essentially it's going through here and either guessing or scanning or the communicator selecting what they want to talk about. If they want to talk about people, they can flip to page 9 and that will be filled with different people that they might be interacting with. If they want to do activities, they can say it's about now and activities, and that'll be about activities that they want to do now. They can flip to page 11 and that'll have a different variety of different activities that they can indicate or request. So that's POD. It's not super common, but it's starting to take off in the United States. I believe it's more common in Europe and Australia. And like I said, it's starting to take off here. When we talk about low-tech systems, they have pros and cons. They're easy to create, use, and understand. They're very intuitive to understand, and they can be created, with BoardMaker, lesson picks in less than an afternoon. It has well-researched methodology behind it. Like we were talking about for PECs, there's a clearly established system that's evidence-based, where if you implement the system as they describe, it's likely to be successful for a large number of students. There are some drawbacks, though. It's cumbersome to update. You have to go back to lesson picks or BoardMaker every time you want to add vocabulary. Sooner or later, you might be walking around with a fully stuffed binder. It's frequently lost, abandoned during school transitions. That seems basic, like, okay, just take the PECS book with you. But working in middle and high schools, I can't tell you the number of times where I don't know what happened, but the student's PECS book or whatever communication they were using, maybe a core board, it just didn't make the trip over to the middle or high school. I don't know how that happens, but it does, and it happens way too frequently. Likewise, just because the student used their communication device or their communication board, I guess, at their previous school doesn't mean that their new teachers are going to know how to implement it. Finally, these low-tech systems have limited language capabilities. They tend to be very heavy on the nouns. Think of the pictures that people use in textbooks to request. It's a lot of nouns. It doesn't allow for a lot of variety in sentence structure. And the student is limited by the words that we've included. I'm sure most of you have experienced that with your core communication boards, where sometimes the communication system just isn't comprehensive enough to generate the idea that you want to communicate. It doesn't lead for independent generation of ideas and communication. A lot of times the student's just dependent on scripts that we have planned and explicitly taught for them. So next up, we have mid and high-tech tools to support language development. So there are a series of, I believe, 5 videos below. You'll see, some mid-tech, and then some also, like the Big Macs, Go Talks. You'll also see LAMP and some other high-tech options. So watch those, and then we'll check in for part 3.